Mr. Eastwood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I didn't expect to be called so quickly, but thank you for that. The previous speakers from my party, Mr. Bradley and Mr. McKinney, who's just sat down, spoken very eloquently about some of the issues that face us. Mr. McKinney laid out very clearly the issues around the health service, and Mr. Bradley spoke more generally around some of the issues. I'll take some of those issues, Mr. Speaker, and then, as I usually do, I'll revert back to dairy, as you probably will imagine that I would. But in terms of I'll probably try and weave it into all the other issues as well, a bit like Mr. Michael Duff on this one. In terms of one of the important issues that Mr. Bradley touched on was the idea around a Colum-style commission, looking at the opportunities for the North around fiscal powers, and there's been much debate clearly about corporation tax, and I don't believe that it's a silver bullet, but I do believe it's a very, very important issue. Anybody who's been to the States and spoken to anybody over there around trying to attract investment to this part of the world knows that we are up against it, because our direct competitors, I would argue they shouldn't be our direct competitors, they should be our partners, is the Republic of Ireland just across the border, and they're able to offer a much more attractive package. So I think we do clearly. The
member raises very interesting points, not just in relation to corporation tax, but to the general range of fiscal powers in the Colum Commission and so forth. Now, given the current situation in Scotland, where we have a referendum on independence, and where all the major parties have conceded that Scotland deserves to receive and will receive greater fiscal powers in relation to its own self-governance, is there not an even stronger argument here in Northern Ireland that we also should be seeking stronger powers in relation to fiscal matters?
I thank the member for his intervention, and I think his point's very well made, because whatever happens in the next few months in Scotland, and I have a particular view on that, and I hope that a certain side of the campaign is very successful, because I think it will have an impact on here that maybe is immeasurable. And I think, I'm not sure everyone's quite grasped how important that is for us. But the member's right. Scotland will not be governed in the same way after the referendum, no matter what happens. If they get independence, they'll obviously have much more in terms of fiscal powers. If they don't get independence, I think Devo Max is very much on the cards, and I think that we need to now start looking around Devo Max and what impact that can have on us. But we also need to think a bit more creatively, Mr. Speaker. I keep telling people we have a 12.5% corporation tax in our city. It's called Muff or Bridgend or Calais. There's opportunities there that we should be working on a cross-border basis with the Irish government and with the organisations in the south who are trying to attract investment to the Republic, by saying, why not look at a cross-border enterprise zone for the North West? I know we've had a recent announcement for Coleraine, and good luck to Coleraine. We've been asking for it for quite a bit longer. We think there's a tremendous opportunity around the cross-border element of that, and we have all the things in place. The Bridgend and Donegal and that area has got that very attractive tax system. In fact, if you look at one of the companies that has located from Derry over to Burnfoot, just down the road, employing hundreds of people, E&I Engineering, I think about 80% of those people are from Derry. They're spending money in Derry. They're buying houses in Derry. The company may be paying tax in the south, but both sides of the border get a benefit there. So I think that's what we need to start looking at, ideas like that to try and reinforce the fact that we should not be in competition with the south. We should be in partnership, and it's not about us on this side of the House waving a tricolour in anybody's face. This is about common sense. North-South, we had a document called North-South Makes Sense, because it just does, and nobody's allegiance to any particular nationality or nation is threatened by that. And I think there are massive opportunities around how we do things that I think should run across every government department in particular when you look at the economy, because I think, I know in our city and in other places the border becomes less and less relevant in terms of people's everyday lives. It should be less and less relevant in terms of the government's policies, particularly around the economy. Mr. Bradley also spoke of the need for budgets and programmes for government to be done, kind of in unison. The idea that we all just turn up after an election and we're all in government, and then we have a row about what the budget should be and what the programme for government should be, doesn't make any real sense in terms of how we should do government. I would far rather see parties go into a negotiation around the programme for government and a budget that actually has a connection to it at the beginning of the term. And we do have an opportunity with the final year of this mandate to try and begin that kind of a process, and hopefully at least after 2016's elections we can start to do things a little bit differently around that. And that brings me to the point, Mr. Speaker, the important point, because one of the major issues in our city is that we've had countless number of plans. We have loads of plans. We know exactly what needs to be done around the economy for Derry, and it is important that it is done, not just for Derry but for Northern Ireland, because we don't want to see queues and queues of people leaving our city or any other place in the north and going to Australia or going to England and never coming back. We don't want to see people continuously claiming benefits when they could be contributing in a very positive way to the economy. We had the answer. It was called the One Plan. And I know that the executive seemed very committed to it, because I stood beside them. I happened to be the mayor. I stood beside them when they came to Derry, over to the waterside, and we launched it. And that was after 18 months of people in the community sector, in the business sector, and all the local statutory agencies and the political parties getting together. And it was a very difficult process, and maybe not one that anyone would want to repeat, but coming up with 11 catalytic projects that would make a huge impact, in our view, on the economy and on the social deprivation indices for the city. It was one that we all signed up to, which is pretty unheard of. I think it was a great process, in that political parties from in here were able to, out there somewhere else, work together like we do in a lot of areas in the city, and come up with a plan that we thought the government should adopt. And the First and Deputy First Ministers came down and launched it and praised us for doing all the hard work. And then when we saw the first draft of the programme for government, it wasn't even mentioned. So we kicked up a fuss, and the Strategy Board in Derry wrote a strongly worded letter, and then it was mentioned. It said the government is committed to, the executive is committed to developing the One Plan, in particular with reference to the two sites, Ebrington and Fort George. Well, we'd already developed the plan, Mr. Speaker. The problem was we now needed to implement it. And unfortunately, if it's not going to be in the programme for government, it's not going to be in any of the ministerial commitments after that. That, for me, was a major, major mistake. And we end up now seeing the outworkings of that. We had a fantastic week in Derry. There was hundreds of thousands of people probably walking along the quay. It was like walking through Cannes or somewhere like that, looking at yachts and spending money and enjoying the weather and enjoying each other's company. People from every background getting together. Derry can do things like that very, very well. But you see, unless we get the economic drivers and the infrastructural fundamentals correct, those things come and go.
The member give away.
Oh, well, yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I detect a certain level of smugness from my colleague and Foyle, and I can understand perfectly. I accept that Derry is the envy of the rest of Northern Ireland in how unionists and nationalists can get together and carry out this kind of fate that happened last week, or indeed last year. But would the member agree with me that there's one thing missing, and that's transport infrastructure? The only city, I think, in Europe that is not connected by a motorway. Still struggling with a railway that's hugely successful. I was on it on Saturday. It was packed. But it does irritate me when somebody on a bicycle can complete the journey to Belfast quicker. Yes, you got the boats, you only got them for a week and they're away now. We also need that ferry between McGilligan and Greencastle. Yes, I know particularly our colleagues in Belfast must feel envious of the success of the maiden city, but surely it's time to put the capital investment into our second city and make it the showpiece which Unionists and Nationalists up there have worked hard for and have won the arguments. What we need now is the money.
Thank the member for his very eloquent intervention, and the House will probably thank him for shortening my speech, because he said most of the things that I wanted to say, and he's right. And the point I was making was we can do fantastic things when people get together and people in Derry decide to work together and get these things done, and we can attract world-class events. Paddy Radio also seemed a wee bit more interested in Glastonbury this morning than they did in the Clipper Festival, but that's another issue. But the member's right. You know, unless we get the infrastructural development correct, we cannot reach our full potential. And we're not asking for anything special. We're asking for the opportunities and the tools to do these things for ourselves. There needs to be a proper road network that doesn't just end at one part of Northern Ireland and doesn't go to another part that has got huge numbers of people living in it. We had a man a couple of weeks ago who cycled to Belfast quicker than you could get the train. He beat the train. You know, what does that tell us about where we're at and where we need to be? If anybody, I could probably do. You couldn't even do it, Mr. Weir. But Mr. McKay could definitely do it. But another point. You try and get a train from Derry to Dublin, and the Dublin train leaves from Belfast 5 minutes before the Derry one arrives. You know, you'd nearly think it was deliberate. But but there's another one, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not going to focus my anger around this on Mr. Farry, because I think he gets all the focus on it when this is a bigger issue, and it goes back to the point that it wasn't put into the programme for government. It's the issue about the development of McGee. And it's nothing to do with welfare reform, as Mr. Farry told me last week, because this is a 50-year debate. When John Hume and the Unionist, we were even doing it back then, when the Unionist mayor came to this place with a lot of other people to demand a proper university for our city. The one plan commitment is around 9,400 by 2020. We're not going to make that the way things are going at the minute. And again, this isn't about us just asking for more places for universities so people don't have to go to Liverpool. It's about underpinning the economy in the city. It's not just about the number of students, it's about the type of courses. It's about being able to create jobs and attract jobs to the city. And it just needs to be done. We send 15,000 students from the north somewhere else every year. That's a university a year, leaves here. We spend all the money and educate them in our schools, and then we send them somewhere else, and 80% of them don't come home and don't contribute to our economy. So I know it's kind of broken record stuff from us, Mr. Speaker, and we're often called whingers, but it isn't about whinging, it's about asking for what's fair and what's right. And I think Derry has proven that when given the opportunities and given the tools, we can deliver something very, very good and very exciting for the people of the city and for the people of the north of Ireland. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Minister.